Echoes call from hollow halls, a voice that creeps and softly crawls. Time stands still, the air is...
You know how internet beef usually goes? A few insults, a couple live streams, maybe a reaction video or two. People argue, fans pick sides, and after a while, everyone moves on. It's content. Nothing ever really happens. At least, that's what we tell ourselves. But one night, on the Las Vegas Strip, something didn't stay online. In the middle of lights, music, and crowds, the energy shifted. At first, people were confused. Then came the sound that didn't belong, and just like that, the entertainment stopped feeling like entertainment. 2 lives were lost that night, and this wasn't random. This was a conflict people had been watching unfold in real time. How far can online drama really go? Because today, we're looking at the 10 YouTubers who were murdered. 1. YouTuber Christina Grimmie, the meet and greet that turned fatal. The moment should have felt safe. A small venue, loyal fans, a rising star smiling just feet away. Then, in seconds, everything changed. Not during the performance, not under bright stage lights, but in the quiet after. The part no one ever thinks is dangerous. Why would they? Christina Grimmie had just finished performing in Orlando, Florida. It was a Friday night in June 2016. The show ended like any other. Music fading out, fans waiting patiently for a chance to meet her. She had even invited them herself, asking people nearby to come out and enjoy the night.
Please come to the show if you live near Orlando, Florida.
And they did. What followed seemed ordinary. A meet and greet. Photos, smiles, brief conversations. A young artist connecting with the people who helped build her career. But then, without warning, 3 loud shots cut through the room. At first, confusion. People froze. Some thought it was part of the show. Others realized too late that something was wrong. And in the middle of that chaos stood Christina, face to face with someone who should have been just another fan.
Gunshots went off.
Pop, 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 pop.
I was traumatized. I didn't know what was going on.
I was in shock.
He wasn't. The man stepped forward and attacked at close range. No warning, no words, just action. And in that instant, the night collapsed into panic. But here's where the story shifts. Christina's brother Mark was there. Not as security, not as protection, just as family. And when everything unfolded, he reacted. He rushed the attacker, tackling him before more harm could be done. A split-second decision that likely saved others in that room.
Her brother's a hero for saving and stopping him, for not hurting anyone else.
The attacker then turned the weapon on himself. So the question becomes, what was this? A random act? Or something planned? Christina was rushed to the hospital. Fans waited, friends hoped. But by the next morning, the news came through. She didn't survive, and suddenly, the world started paying attention. But here's what makes this case unsettling. Christina wasn't just a performer. She was one of the earliest YouTube success stories. A teenager who sat in front of a camera, hosted covers online, and built a global audience from her bedroom. Over time, those videos crossed 100 million views. That kind of connection feels personal, direct, almost like the audience knows you. But what happens when someone takes that too far? Authorities later identified the attacker as a 27-year-old man who had traveled over 100 miles to reach that concert. He wasn't local. He didn't just stumble into the venue. He came prepared, carrying multiple weapons.
He had 2 handguns on his person. He had 2 additional loaded magazines for those handguns.
So this wasn't impulsive. It raises a deeper question. What was going on in his mind during that drive? Investigators searched his phone and computer, trying to understand the motive. But what they found did not give clear answers. No direct connection, no conversation, no relationship in the real world.
Detectives are doing right now is they're going through the suspect's cell phone and computer to see if they could find a motive for this crime.
Only distance, and possibly something imagined. Experts suggest that in cases like this, individuals can develop a one-sided attachment, a belief that they know the person on the screen, a connection that feels real to them but does not exist in reality.
People who travel a long distance, in this case armed, may well have some sort of fantasy in their head relationship with the person that they ultimately end up killing. A love relationship with the person that doesn't exist.
A relationship that was never returned. And when that illusion breaks, what happens next? That question lingers, because Christina was known for being kind, open, and welcoming. At the meet and greet, witnesses said she approached fans with her arms open. No hesitation, no fear, just trust. That same openness, the thing that made people love her, may have also left her exposed.
She was arms open wide. She had no idea, and she treated everybody the same. And it was hard for her because she was introverted.
And that leads to another uncomfortable reality. Not every artist has protection. Unlike major global stars with full security teams, many rising performers operate without that level of safety. Smaller venues, closer contact, fewer barriers. It creates a stronger connection with fans, but also increases risk.
Like Madonna, for example, they are going to have security around them all the time, no matter where they might be. As you go down the tier of people less famous, make less money, chances are they may have no security.
And there have been warnings, moments where fans rushed stages, grabbed artists, got too close. Most ended without serious harm, but those incidents showed something important. Access is not always controlled. So how do you balance connection and safety? How do you stay close to your audience without putting yourself in danger? Even professional security experts admit there is no perfect answer. You can reduce risk, you can build layers of protection, but you can never eliminate it completely.
The celebrities hate the bubble because they like to control everything, and when you're controlling their movements and who gets access to the bubble, it irks them to a point, but they usually respect the bubble enough to stay within it, at least the clients that we accept.
That is the reality Christina stepped into that night. And after everything, after the tributes, the emotional performances, and the global reaction, one question still remains. Why her? Because in a space built on connection, trust, and visibility, Christina Grimmie did everything right. She shared her talent, she built her audience, she showed up for her fans, and somehow, that still wasn't enough to keep her safe. Before we continue, do you remember we set a goal to hit 250,000 subscribers by April? Well, we didn't fully get there, but we crossed 230,000 plus, and honestly, I'm just grateful. That kind of growth doesn't happen without every single one of you watching right now. So now we're setting a new goal, a bigger one, 300,000 subscribers before October 2026. Yeah, it's a big goal, but this time we've got time. And more importantly, I trust you and this community that we've built. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. Let's make this happen together. Now, back to the video. 2. YouTuber Bianca Devins. The murder that was posted online before she reached out. And somewhere in that digital world, she met someone who would change everything. His name was Brandon Andrew Clark. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Conversations turned into a friendship. They met in person. He was polite, even charming to those around her. But behind that surface, something else was building. Obsession. Here's where things become unclear. Bianca saw him as a friend, someone she could talk to. But he saw something more. He referred to himself as her boyfriend, even though those close to her say that was never the case. So what happens when one person believes in a relationship that the other does not? That gap can be dangerous. On the night before everything happened, they attended a concert together. It should have ended like any normal night. Music, conversations, a ride home. But something shifted along the way. According to messages Bianca sent to friends, he had become upset, jealous. Why? Because she showed attention to someone else. And that moment, small on the surface, may have triggered everything that followed. In the early hours of that Sunday morning, Bianca was in a car with him. At some point, she stopped responding to messages. The last one came just hours before her body was discovered. Then, around sunrise, the internet saw what had happened before authorities even arrived. Photos were uploaded. A video followed. Content that should never have existed, now spreading faster than anyone could stop it. People shared it, questioned it, some even doubted it. Was it real? or just another attempt to go viral. But it was real. Police were alerted not just by witnesses, but by the posts themselves. Even more unsettling, the person responsible contacted authorities, making statements that confirmed what had taken place. When officers arrived, Bianca was already gone, and he was still there. He had harmed her in a moment fueled by jealousy. But what came after raises even deeper concerns, because this was not just about anger. Evidence later suggested planning, searches, preparation, even recording.
To replay this message, press 4.
Hey Graham, it's Brandon. I hope I would be able to reach you, but I guess I'm not able to, so I know this is going to come as kind of a surprise, at least to you it isn't to me. But I killed someone today. I killed my girlfriend. Well, she's supposed to be my girlfriend, but she cheated on me. And I just...
So was this truly impulsive, or was there something more calculated behind it? During the investigation, it became clear that the damage did not end at the scene. The images continued to circulate. Despite efforts to remove them, they spread across multiple platforms, and for Bianca's family that meant reliving the tragedy over and over again. Imagine losing someone, and then being forced to see it replayed online. How do you even begin to process that? Her family described her as a light, someone who wanted to study psychology and help others, someone who believed in connection, even in a world that can be harsh. But that same world turned her final moments into something people consumed. Eventually, the man responsible was arrested, charged, and later sentenced. He expressed regret, saying he wished he could undo what happened. But that raises a question with no easy answer. Can regret ever match the damage done? Because the impact didn't stop with one life.
Apologize. How do you meaningfully apologize for doing something so horrible and so irreversible? And that's the worst part, is that I can't take it back. I want to. I wish I could. I would give my life in a heartbeat to Bianca if I could. And I can't. Every day I wake up and I wonder how she would have spent that day if she were still here. Every day I wish that I could do more than just wonder. And I hate myself for what I did to her.
Her family continues to deal with the aftermath. Her sister, her mother, all left with memories they never chose to have. And even now, traces of that night still exist online. So what does this case really show? That danger doesn't always come from strangers in the dark. Sometimes it comes from someone you spoke to, someone you trusted, someone who slowly crossed a line you didn't even see forming. And in a world where everything can be shared instantly, one final question remains. When something this tragic happens, should the internet be a witness or a weapon? YouTuber Gabby Petito, the road trip that hid something dark. From the outside, it looked like freedom. A young couple in a white van, crossing the country, chasing sunsets, national parks, and the kind of life social media loves to romanticize. Their pages showed smiles, adventure, and a future that seemed wide open. So how did a trip designed to look beautiful become one of the most disturbing internet-backed cases of the decade? Gabby Petito was 22 years old, creative, bright, and deeply expressive. She and Brian Laundrie had been together for years, and in July 2020, they announced their engagement. A year later, in July 2021, they began a cross-country van trip and launched a YouTube channel called Nomadic Static. It had all the ingredients of an online dream: travel content, couple branding, a carefully framed life on the road. But behind that image, something was breaking. The first major warning came in August 2021 in Moab, Utah. A witness called emergency services after seeing a man hit a woman near a white van.
I'd like to report a domestic dispute. Florida with a white van, Florida license plate, white land, gentleman,
Where's
about
it at?
5'6", beard. They just drove off. They're going down Main Street.
What were they doing?
We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl.
He was slapping her?
Yes, and then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
Okay, you said it's a white van?
White van. I can give you the license plate. Just give me 1 sec. I took a picture of it.
Police stopped the couple and released body camera footage that would later be watched by millions. Gabby appeared shaken, overwhelmed, and quick to take the blame. She described it as a couple's argument. The officers separated them for the night, but in a decision that still sparks outrage, they treated Gabby as the primary aggressor and did not file a serious case. That moment still haunts people, because when you watch footage like that, one question becomes impossible to ignore. Was this the moment her life could have been saved? Many people who had experienced controlling relationships saw something familiar in Gabby's behavior. The anxious tone, the minimizing, the way she seemed more focused on protecting him than explaining what had happened. Those patterns do not always look dramatic in real time. Sometimes they look like nervous laughter, confusion, and someone trying to keep the peace. Then the timeline began tightening. On August 17th, Ryan flew back to Florida for a few days, saying he needed supplies. He later rejoined the trip. On August 24th, Gabby had a FaceTime call with her mother. She seemed tired, less animated, but still trying to move forward. The next day, she posted a smiling photo online. It would become one of the last images of her alive. By August 27th, witnesses saw the couple at a restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Staff later said Brian was visibly angry, moving in and out, raising his voice. Gabby appeared embarrassed and apologetic. It was the last confirmed public sighting of her. Then everything turned strange. Brian was later seen alone. A text came from Gabby's phone mentioning Yosemite, even though that location did not fit the timeline. Her mother believed Gabby had not written it. On September 1st, Brian returned to his parents' home in Florida, alone, in the same van they had taken together. And that is where the case exploded. He came home without Gabby, said nothing to her family, contacted no authorities, and remained silent while they searched for answers. Days later, Gabby was officially reported missing. Then Brian disappeared too. What followed felt less like a missing person case and more like a trail of red flags that kept multiplying. Gabby's body was found in September 2021 near the Spread Creek area in Wyoming. Investigators concluded she had been killed around August 27th. Brian became the focus of a nationwide search.
Gabby's body was found in Wyoming's Bridger-Teton National Forest on Sunday, and Laundrie has been named a person of interest.
Then, after weeks of nothing, his remains were found in a Florida reserve alongside a notebook. Inside was a confession, but instead of clarity, it created more anger. He tried to frame what happened as an act of mercy after an accident. Investigators did not support that version. The evidence pointed elsewhere. The note felt less like truth and more like an attempt to control the story one last time. And then there was the family. Brian's parents were heavily criticized for their silence, their shifting timelines, and their behavior during the investigation. Public suspicion only grew when details emerged about a letter from his mother with disturbing wording that many found impossible to ignore, even if she claimed it had another meaning. Whether or not they knew everything, people still ask the same question. Why did they do so little when every second mattered? That is why this case stayed everywhere. Not just because Gabby was a YouTuber documenting her journey, but because so many chances to intervene seem visible in hindsight. Gabby should have finished that trip and come home safely. Instead, her story became a warning about curated online lives, ignored warning signs, and how easy it is for danger to hide behind beautiful content. And even now, one thought refuses to go away. How many people saw pieces of the truth, but not enough to stop what was coming? 4. YouTuber Amie Harwick, the ex who waited inside her house. She made it home safely. At least, that is what it should have been. It was Valentine's night in February 2020. Los Angeles was still glowing with parties, traffic, and late-night energy. Amie Harwick had spent the evening with friends and returned to her Hollywood Hills home after what should have been an ordinary night out. But inside that house, something was already wrong. Someone had gotten there first, and he had been waiting. Amie Harwick was not just known socially in Hollywood. She was a therapist, author, media personality, and YouTube creator whose work focused on relationships, sexuality, and emotional healing. She had built a name around helping people understand themselves and navigate difficult personal lives. Friends described her as intelligent, vibrant, and deeply compassionate. She had presence, purpose, and a career centered on guiding others through pain, which makes what happened to her feel even more cruel. Because behind her public success was a chapter of her life that never fully let go of her. Years earlier, she had been in a relationship with Gareth Pershouse. In the beginning, he appeared charming and exciting. But according to court records and accounts referenced, the relationship quickly became controlling and frightening. Amie reported violence, harassment, and escalating behavior. She sought protection. She tried to separate herself from him. Eventually, she got a restraining order, but time passing did not mean the danger had passed. That is the detail that changes everything in this case. The obsession did not burn out. It stayed quiet for years. Then, in January 2020, they crossed paths again at a public event. Gareth confronted her there in a way that immediately alarmed people around them. He had not moved on. He still remembered old messages, old details, old grievances. Amie left that encounter shaken. She reportedly told friends that if anything happened to her, he was the person they should look at. Think about that for a second. How afraid does someone have to be to say something like that out loud? After the encounter, she tried to protect herself. She changed locks, bought protective items, and installed security measures. She was clearly taking the threat seriously. But the terrifying truth is that sometimes a person can do everything right and still remain vulnerable when the other person is determined enough. On the night of February 14th, he allegedly drove to her home, dressed in dark clothing, disabled an outside camera, broke in, and waited inside for hours. That detail alone is enough to make this case unforgettable. Not a sudden confrontation, not a chance encounter. Waiting, planning. When Amie came home after midnight and went upstairs, the attack began. Her roommate heard screaming, breaking sounds, and violent movement overhead. In panic, he tried to get help, eventually leading to a call to emergency services. By the time officers arrived, Amie had suffered catastrophic injuries and was found below her balcony. She was taken to the hospital, but she did not survive. And that is where the case shifts from tragedy to proof of something even larger, because investigators concluded this was not spontaneous, it was deliberate. They found evidence of forced entry, a syringe containing nicotine, and signs that the attacker had come prepared. In other words, this was not a person losing control in a sudden moment. This was someone carrying obsession for years and finally turning it into action. Gareth Pursehouse was arrested soon after. At trial, the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was convicted and later sentenced to life without parole. But even with that sentence, one question remains painfully unresolved. Could this have been prevented? That is why Amie Harwick's story still resonates. Not just because she was a public figure, but because her case highlights how dangerous stalking and fixation can become when warning signs are dismissed, protections expire, or fear is treated as overreaction. She saw the danger. She named it. She tried to prepare for it, and still, she was not kept safe. Amie spent her life helping people escape emotional harm and reclaim their sense of self. In the end, her story became a devastating reminder that abuse is not always over just because the relationship is. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who cannot accept being left behind. 5. YouTuber Qandeel Baloch, the star who was killed for being unapologetic. She did not disappear quietly. She was already one of the most talked about women in Pakistan before her life was taken, and that is exactly what made the case so explosive. Qandeel Baloch was not just a social media personality. She was a symbol of visibility, defiance, and controversy in a country where many people still believe women should stay within lines drawn for them by others. So when she was killed in July 2016, the question was never only who did it. The bigger question was why so many people seemed ready to explain it away. Qandeel built her name by doing something that sounds simple, but was treated as dangerous. She posted boldly. She spoke freely. She pushed against what was considered acceptable for women online. That made her famous, but it also made her a target. Many compared her to reality television stars in the West, but that comparison only goes so far. She did not have wealth, elite protection, or powerful people shielding her. Underneath the headlines, she was a woman from a poor background, trying to build a life through the internet. And for a while, it worked. Her videos spread fast. Her name stayed in public conversation. She became impossible to ignore. But fame in that kind of environment can turn into exposure very quickly. The more visible she became, the more intense the scrutiny became. It was not just criticism. It was judgment, outrage, and humiliation wrapped in the language of morality. Then came the turning point. Earlier that year, Qandeel appeared in the media with a well-known religious cleric, Mufti Abdul Qavi. Their exchange drew enormous attention, and later, selfies of the two caused a national uproar. To many people, that moment was treated like proof that she had crossed a line. The cleric lost an official position and the scandal took on a life of its own. Suddenly, Qandeel was not just controversial, she was being blamed for embarrassing powerful men in public. That pressure did not stay online. The media began digging deeper into her private life. Her identity, family background, and personal details were pushed into the spotlight. Once that happened, the distance between her online image and her real-world family collapsed. And in a conservative environment where reputation is treated like a collective burden, that collapse can be dangerous, very dangerous. Qandeel had already hinted that she felt threatened before her death. Then, while visiting family in her home area, her life was taken. Her brother was arrested and confessed, framing it as an act tied to family honor. That confession stunned the public, but it also revealed something deeply disturbing about how these crimes can function. At the time, there was a belief that family forgiveness could close such a case. In other words, the system itself had room for the crime to be absorbed back into the family.
वो इस मुफ्ती अब्दुल कवी के बाद I swear मुझे इतने ज़्यादा threats आ रहे कि मेरी ज़िंदगी से सुकून चला गया, मुझे मेरी रातों की नींद उड़ गई है.
So was this just one man's act, or part of a much bigger structure? That is what kept this case alive. Because the murder was not only about one brother, it opened questions about family pressure, clerical influence, media intrusion, and a culture that often blames women for the hostility directed at them. Multiple people were drawn into the investigation. Names surfaced, allegations multiplied. Yet years passed without the clear sense of justice many hoped for. Even more frustrating, the case sparked legal reform. Pakistan changed its law so that so-called honor killings could not simply disappear through family forgiveness. The reform became known as Qandeel's Law. On paper, that sounded like progress. But paper is one thing, reality is another. Because what good is a stronger law if families still feel pressured to retract, communities still sympathize with the killer, and women still do not feel safe being visible? That may be the most haunting part of Qandeel Baloch's story. She became a national symbol in death, but the conditions that made her vulnerable did not vanish with the headlines. Other women online still face threats, shame, and constant policing of their behavior. Many speak carefully, many hold back. Some never step forward at all. Qandeel wanted to live on her own terms, and that should not have been treated like a crime. But in the end, her murder exposed more than family violence. It exposed a society still wrestling with whether a woman can be fully seen, fully heard, and still be allowed to live without punishment. 6. YouTuber Anastasia Tropitsel. The video she filmed moments before her death, the last thing she did was smile into the camera. Not in a studio, not in a planned shoot, but on a moving motorcycle. The wind, the road, the sunset behind her. It looked like another perfect moment for social media. Another clip to inspire, to show freedom, to show a life most people dream about. But what no one watching could have known was that this would become the final video she ever recorded. Anastasia Tropitsel was just 18 years old, a young influencer who had already built a massive online presence, with over 1 million followers watching her life unfold. She had started early, building her brand from the age of 12, and by 15, she was already describing herself as a self-made millionaire. That kind of story attracts attention. She shared motivation, luxury travel, and a lifestyle built around confidence and independence. At the time of her death, she was living in Bali, continuing to grow her platform while the world slowed down around her. To her audience, everything looked controlled, successful, intentional. But behind the scenes, things were not as stable as they appeared. Just before her death, she had been involved in a public disagreement with her father. He warned her that her business was falling apart, that her focus had shifted away from work and into enjoyment. His words were direct, almost harsh. He told her she needed to regain control if she wanted to sustain her life. So which version was real? The confident influencer building an empire, or the young woman being told everything was slipping away? That tension is important, because it shows something often hidden in influencer culture, the gap between what is shown online and what is actually happening behind the screen. Then came the day everything ended. She was riding a Ninja 250 motorbike alongside her boyfriend. According to him, she was moving at a normal speed for the road, somewhere between 80 and 100 kilometers per hour. Nothing unusual, nothing reckless. At least, that is how it was described. But suddenly, something changed. He said the bike began to wobble, and in situations like that, even a small loss of control can turn into something irreversible within seconds. There is no pause button, no second take, just momentum. The footage she recorded shows her calm, smiling, completely unaware of what was about to happen. A moment later, that normal ride became a fatal accident, and here is what makes this case especially haunting. It was all documented, not intentionally as a final message, but as part of her routine. Recording, sharing, capturing life as it happens. The same habit that built her success also preserved her last moments. And once that video surfaced, it changed how people saw the story, because now it was not just news. It was something people could witness. Her boyfriend later spoke publicly, describing her as careful and experienced. He insisted that she always rode safely, that this was not the result of reckless behavior, but something unexpected, a sudden loss of control that no one could have predicted. But even with that explanation, questions remain. Was it speed? Was it the road? Was it a distraction? Or was it simply a tragic moment that no one could have prevented? After her death, her social media pages filled with messages. Hundreds of thousands of people reacting, commenting, trying to process what had happened. Her final post announcing her passing gathered massive attention, with people from around the world sending their condolences. And that is where the story becomes deeper. Because Anastasia built her identity on overcoming fear. She encouraged her followers to face what scares them, to push forward, to live boldly. That message inspired many people, but it also raises a difficult question. At what point does chasing freedom become stepping into risk? This is not about blaming her. It is about understanding the reality behind the lifestyle that is often presented online. The idea that everything is under control, when in truth, life can change without warning. In the end, Anastasia Tropitsel's story is not just about a tragic accident. It is about perception, about how quickly a perfect image can break, and about how a single moment, captured on camera, can turn from inspiration into something people will never forget. 7. YouTuber Finny Da Legend, the live stream feud that turned deadly. It started as content, two creators, cameras rolling, tension building online, where everything feels louder than it really is. Arguments, back and forth, territory, ego, the kind of conflict that usually stays behind screens. But this time, it didn't stay there. It followed them into the real world, onto one of the busiest streets in America, and that is where everything ended. On a Sunday night in June 2024, the Las Vegas Strip was packed like always. Tourists, lights, music, people walking past the Bellagio fountains. Then suddenly, the normal noise of the city was broken by something else. Gunfire.
Graphic video you see appears to show a person fire a gun at YouTuber Rodney Finley, aka Finny Da Legend, and his wife Tanisha Finley. Both Finny Da Legend and Tanisha Finley would die after the shooting.
At first, people were confused. Some thought someone had fainted. Others heard sirens and assumed it was just another emergency. But within moments, the scene shifted. Police rushed in. Areas were blocked off, and two people were lying on the sidewalk. One of them was YouTuber Rodney Finley, known online as Finny Da Legend. The other was his wife, Tanisha. Both would not survive. And here is what makes this case different. It wasn't random. According to reports, this was the result of an ongoing conflict that had been building online for over a year. A feud between content creators that slowly escalated beyond comments and videos. Viewers had seen the tension. Other streamers knew about it. But like most internet dramas, it was expected to stay digital. So how does something like that cross into real life? That question sits at the center of this case. Witnesses described hearing multiple sirens, more than usual, the kind that makes you stop and look around.
I heard sirens, that's normal, but then I heard a lot of sirens. And so I saw they were like blocking off the strip, and I thought, okay, something's going on.
Police officers who were already nearby responded almost immediately after hearing the shots. They found the victims on the ground and began searching for the person responsible. At that point, no one knew where the attacker had gone. But the next day, something unexpected happened. The suspect, identified as a 41-year-old man named Manuel Ruiz, turned himself in. He was charged with 2 counts of murder involving a deadly weapon. And just like that, a social media conflict had become a criminal case.
He's, demanding, like, you can't go here, you can't do that. And a lot of people don't like that, so he started losing his streamers.
Good morning, Mr. Ruiz. You were arrested for 2 counts of open murder with use of a deadly weapon.
But the story doesn't end there. People within the streaming community began speaking about the tension leading up to that night. Some claimed that Finny had started entering spaces that Ruiz considered his territory. Others described ongoing disputes, arguments, and personal clashes that had been building for months.
Over a year now, from my understanding from fans who watch both of these pages, but also just people who may have known them, it's not something very simple or one-time thing. This has been going on since, from my understanding, Halloween of 2023.
It was not a single moment. It was a buildup, and that makes it more unsettling because it suggests there were warning signs, conversations, confrontations, signals that something was not right. But like most online conflicts, it may not have been taken seriously enough until it was too late. Then there is another layer to this: identity. Experts point out that for many creators, their online presence is not just a hobby, it becomes who they are. Their audience, their content, their space. When that identity feels threatened, some people react in ways that go far beyond logic.
A lot of people's lives get evolved or submerged around, their identity gets formed around what they are doing in an online way.
So was this about content or something deeper? Neighbors of the suspect described him as normal, quiet, friendly, the kind of person you would not expect to be connected to something like this. And that detail always adds another level of discomfort because it reminds people that not every warning sign is visible.
And then we just heard a bunch of cops show up, and I peeked out the window because you hear them saying, "Come out with your hands up," repeatedly for a long time last night. It went on for like half an hour with multiple police cars, and then after that it dwindled down to 1 car, and they kept repeating that. So I think ultimately he never came here to the neighborhood, but they were doing, the cops did good due diligence. Completely shocked because they're nice people. They put up decorations for all the holidays. They take them down on time. They keep their house clean. They had a dead tree. They had it removed. Like, they're really good neighbors. They wave when they go to the mailbox. I don't know how.
Not every escalation is obvious. The location also matters. This did not happen in isolation. It happened in one of the most public, heavily visited places in the country, a place people associate with entertainment and safety. Yet at that moment, it became a crime scene.
Just to show you right now what we're seeing, Kim, we still have this area blocked off.
Tons of police presence here from our end. Currently right now at Las Vegas Boulevard and Flamingo, here on top of the pedestrian walkway where we are getting our best.
Which leads to another uncomfortable question. If something like this can happen there, where else can it happen? Authorities later spoke about laws surrounding firearms in the area, explaining that carrying a weapon in public spaces like the Strip is allowed under certain conditions. That reality has sparked debates about safety, awareness, and how quickly situations can change when weapons are involved. But beyond laws and policies, the core of this case remains the same. A conflict that started online did not stay online, and that is what makes this story so relevant. Because in a world where people build entire identities through screens, where arguments can reach thousands instantly, the line between digital and real life is becoming thinner. Finny Da Legend built his presence through content, through visibility, through being seen. But in the end, it was that same visibility that placed him in the middle of something far more dangerous than anyone expected. And now the question lingers. How many online conflicts are closer to real-world consequences than people are willing to admit? 8. YouTuber Serena Vermeersch, the teen vlogger who never made it home. A month before her life was taken, she said something that now feels chilling in hindsight. She said she was against murder. She said no one deserves to die. At the time, it was just a thought shared in a vlog, but after what happened to her, those words took on a weight no one could ignore. Because not long after saying them, Serena Vermeersch was found dead near train tracks in Surrey, British Columbia. And once people learned who was responsible, the case became even more disturbing. Serena was only 17 years old. She was not a celebrity on a massive scale, but she was part of that early generation of young YouTubers who turned simple cameras into a way of expressing themselves. Her videos were casual, honest, and unpolished in the way many early vlogs were. No heavy production, no complicated branding, just a teenager talking, sharing, and being herself. That is part of what makes this case hit so hard. She was ordinary in the most relatable way. She liked everyday things, had friends, went to school, and was described as cheerful, kind, and responsible. The kind of teenager whose life still felt full of beginnings. So when she did not come home one night in September 2014, her family knew something was wrong. At first, there was still hope, like many parents would. Her mother considered the normal possibilities. Maybe Serena had been delayed. Maybe she was with friends. Maybe her phone had died. But as the hours passed and there were no replies, that hope turned into fear. Police were contacted. Alerts were issued. The search began. The last known detail seemed simple enough. Serena had taken a bus and was expected to walk only a short distance home. She never made it. That is the part that unsettles people most. She was so close, just minutes from safety, minutes from her front door. Yet somewhere along that familiar route, her night was cut short. More than a day after she disappeared, police found her near train tracks in an industrial area. It was quiet, dim, and largely empty at night. The kind of place that can feel harmless in daylight and deeply isolating after dark. Investigators quickly suspected this was not an accident. Then the case took an even darker turn. Witnesses reported seeing a man near the area around the time Serena vanished, along with a large gray or silver pickup truck. That tip became crucial. Investigators gathered statements, checked available surveillance footage, and pushed hard for answers. 5 days later, they identified a suspect. His name was Raymond Casey. And this is where public anger exploded, because Casey was not unknown to the system. He was a repeat violent offender who had spent years in prison for earlier crimes. He had failed evaluations, made troubling statements in the past, and even expressed fear about what he might do if released. Yet despite all of that, he had been allowed back into society. So people began asking the question that still follows this case. Who is truly responsible when someone dangerous is released and another life is destroyed? Casey followed Serena after she got off the bus and forced her toward a secluded area. She fought back. That mattered. It shows she did everything she could in a moment no one should ever face. But in the end, she could not overpower him. Later, Casey admitted responsibility and was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole for many years. But even that did not settle the outrage, because this case was never only about one man's actions. It was also about failure. Failure of assessment, failure of supervision, failure to protect the public from someone already known to be a danger. Serena's death did not just expose a violent criminal. It exposed the cost of getting a decision horribly wrong. Her mother later refused any apology from him, saying he was dead to her in her mind. And honestly, that tells you everything about the damage left behind. Some losses do not leave room for closure, only absence. Serena should have been remembered for her personality, her creativity, and the life she was just beginning to build online. Instead, her name became attached to a question that still angers people now. When the warning signs are already there, why does it sometimes take a tragedy before anyone acts like they mattered? Nine. YouTuber Nancy Grewal, the outspoken voice, silenced while she was working. She was not at a rally. She was not filming a confrontation. She was not even in front of a camera when her life was taken. According to the report, Nancy Grewal was simply at work, carrying out her duties as a caregiver and nurse during a home visit in Windsor, Canada. And that is what makes this case feel so unsettling from the start. If someone can be targeted in a moment that is ordinary, then where exactly does safety begin? Nancy was known online for being outspoken. She was a Punjabi-origin Canadian YouTuber who built attention through commentary that many people considered bold, confrontational, and unafraid. She spoke on politics, religion, India-Canada tensions, and controversial figures linked to issues that already carried heavy emotion within parts of the Punjabi community.
Grewal was known for her outspoken views on YouTube. She was quite popular. She spoke on politics, on religious issues, including criticism of the Khalistani movement and commentary on India-Canada relations.
That kind of content can build a loyal audience. It can also build enemies. And in Nancy's case, the danger may not have appeared overnight. Her family says she had been receiving threats for months because of the positions she took publicly. Her mother even claimed that Canadian police had already been informed weeks before her death. If that is true, then the question becomes much harder to ignore.
Her mother has alleged that Grewal had been receiving threats for months because of her outspoken nature. The family claims that Grewal had already informed Canadian police about these threats a few weeks ago.
Was this tragedy preceded by warnings that never received enough weight? Because once a threat moves from the comment section into real life, the whole story changes. Nancy was 45 years old, and unlike many online creators whose work exists only on the internet, she had another world outside the screen. She worked as a caregiver and nurse, which means her life was divided between digital influence and personal service. One part of her spoke loudly online. The other part showed up in people's homes to help.
This 45-year-old girl, who was also working as a caregiver and a nurse in Canada, was reportedly stabbed to death on 3rd of March while on duty at a residence that she had visited as part of her work.
That contrast matters. It shows that she was not simply chasing controversy for attention. She was also living a practical life, working, moving through her routines, carrying responsibilities beyond YouTube. So when she was killed during a work visit on the 3rd of March, the story hit with a different kind of force. It suggested that whatever anger surrounded her views may have followed her far beyond the internet. And then another layer emerged. Her family claimed that months earlier, her house in Windsor had been set on fire. They believed it may have been connected to her activism. If that detail is accurate, then this was not a single frightening incident. It was a pattern. Threats, fear, a possible attack on her home. Then, finally, the killing itself.
They also say that a few months ago, her house in Windsor was allegedly set on fire, an incident they believe may have been linked to her activism.
That kind of sequence changes how people look at motive, because now it no longer feels like random violence. It starts to look like escalation. Nancy had reportedly criticized the Khalistani movement and commented on prominent political and religious names. She had also spoken publicly about the earlier death of another social media figure. That means she was already operating in a space where speaking out could bring intense backlash. Some creators survive that pressure. Others become surrounded by it.
Spoken out against jailed MP Amritpal Singh, Akali leader Bikram Singh Majithia, and Gurinder Singh Dillon of Dera Base. Later, in fact, we hear that last year she had raised concerns following the death of social media influencer Kanchan Kumari in Bathinda as well.
But how much pressure can one person carry before the danger becomes impossible to ignore? That is the question hovering over this case. Canadian authorities launched a murder investigation, and the killing quickly sparked concern among members of the Punjabi diaspora in Canada. Not only because of who Nancy was, but because of what her death seemed to represent. For some, it raised fears about political intimidation. For others, it exposed the vulnerability of outspoken voices living far from the countries their commentary focuses on, yet still caught in the tensions of those issues.
Authorities have now launched an investigation into this killing, which has also raised serious concerns among members of the Punjabi diaspora in Canada, and also about the safety of Indians, whatever is happening in Canada.
And that may be the most disturbing part of all. Nancy's story suggests that the internet does not always contain conflict. Sometimes it exports it. Sometimes the opinions shared through a phone camera spill over into neighborhoods, workplaces, and homes. The screen makes everything feel distant, but the consequences can become frighteningly physical. Right now, the biggest unanswered question is still motive. Was she targeted directly for what she said? Or is there another explanation still waiting to emerge? Until investigators answer that, the case remains suspended between allegation and proof. But one thing is already clear. Nancy Grewal lived publicly, spoke fearlessly, and paid a price that no commentator should ever have to pay. And when a person says they are being threatened, then later ends up dead, the silence left behind forces one brutal thought to the surface. What warning signs do people only take seriously after it is already too late? Streamer I Am Mommy, the live stream that ended in broad daylight. At first, people thought they were watching an ordinary live stream, a creator walking through the city, talking to viewers, doing what she had done many times before. Then the stream suddenly turned chaotic. Confusion spread fast. Viewers could hear panic, sirens, and a voice that should never have been part of that broadcast. In a matter of moments, a public live stream in Japan became the center of one of the most shocking crimes of the year. The victim was a 22-year-old streamer known online as I Am Mommy. She was active on a Japanese streaming platform, where she had built a strong following through chatting streams and everyday interaction with her audience. She was not a distant celebrity. She was the kind of creator whose whole appeal came from feeling accessible. That closeness mattered, because it is also what opened the door to the man who would later destroy everything. His name was Kenichi Takano, a 42-year-old viewer who found her stream in December 2021. At first, he looked like a very supportive fan. He donated heavily, sometimes the equivalent of hundreds of dollars a month. For a rising streamer, that kind of support stands out. And it did. She noticed him. Then the relationship moved away from the platform and into private messages. That is where this story stops looking like a simple parasocial case and starts looking much darker. According to the leaked messages, she began asking him for money directly. Not tips during streams, but private bank transfers. At first, the requests sounded temporary, a missing wallet, a short-term problem, a promise to repay him within days. But the money kept being requested, and the amounts kept increasing. Then came the part that makes this case so disturbing. Takano reportedly told her he was borrowing money from loan companies to keep helping her. That should have been the moment everything stopped. Instead, the messages suggest she kept pressing him for more, even when he admitted he was already in trouble. He was scared. He was lying on applications. He was sinking financially. And yet the requests continued. Why? That question hangs over the entire case, because the messages paint a picture of emotional pressure, financial dependence, and a man whose judgment was slowly breaking down. At one point, when he hesitated, she allegedly used messages that sounded desperate and emotionally loaded. It is not hard to see how someone already attached to her could read those words and feel responsible for keeping her afloat. But was he helping her or being used by her? By early 2023, he had reportedly given her around 2.5 million yen. When he finally asked for the money back, the tone changed. Replies became vague. Then came silence. Eventually, he took the legal route and sued her. In December 2023, he won. A judge ordered that the money be repaid. That should have settled it. It did not. He still got nothing back. Meanwhile, he kept watching her online. Still active, still earning, still living her life while he was drowning in debt. To him, the court victory changed nothing. The money was gone, his life was collapsing, and the person he blamed seemed untouched by it all. Then came March 2025. He sent one final message, asking for at least a small repayment. He described being broke, deeply depressed, and overwhelmed. He was ignored again. 4 days later, she was live streaming outdoors in Shinjuku. He recognized the area, traveled there, found her, and confronted her during the broadcast. That confrontation ended her life. And that is why this case unsettled so many people. Not just because it happened live, but because the motive seems tangled in years of resentment, manipulation, debt, obsession, and emotional collapse. Some people focused only on the attacker. Others looked at the messages and argued that the story was more complicated than the headline suggested. But complicated does not mean justified. Whatever happened before, crossing that line can never be defended. A financial dispute, emotional manipulation, or a broken fantasy does not give anyone the right to turn anger into irreversible violence. What remains is a case that left people arguing over blame, warning signs, and how it should have ended. Because underneath the live stream, the court case, and the public reaction is one brutal truth. This was a long spiral that should have been stopped long before it ever reached the street. And that brings us to the end of this episode. If you found this video informative, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what we drop next. We cover stories like this almost every day, and trust me, you don't want to be left behind. If you can't wait until the next upload, there are more videos popping up on your screen in just a few seconds. Click one and keep watching. Until then, take care. I'm out.